thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you so much to Ms. Jessica Bishop for joining us today, taking the time out of a busy schedule. And I would like to thank everybody who has joined us here today, especially our partners, other real estate societies at UCL, Warwick, Exeter, Manchester, LSE and Imperial. And Ms. Jessica Bishop, she's currently at DDRE. She has over $1 billion in sales and Tatler's West End Queen. So, would you like to start by giving us an introduction? What do you want to say?
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you to all of you for coming this evening. So as Sundara mentioned, I currently work at DDRE Global, which is a US-style brokerage in London, which was one of the first sort of brokerages to actually open up in London. I've been here for 3 years, but prior to that, I started my career at Knight Frank back in 2015. I started as an admin assistant because I wanted to get my foot in the door with this big global company, and at the time they weren't giving anyone that didn't have any form of experience an opportunity for a job. So I took the role as the admin assistant to sort of prove myself and hopefully find an opportunity. I did do that, and then I spent 2.5 years in the North London market and became the highest selling core agent there. So core is anything up to £4.5 million. And then from there I moved to the Kensington office and I worked in the prime team, which is between 4.5 and 10 million, and super prime is 10 million plus. And I was there for almost 6 years. I was one of the youngest partners and the youngest female partner at Knight Frank, and the highest billing agent, and ended up selling more homes above £20 million than anyone else whilst I was there. And now I'm here getting to talk to all you lovely people.
That's very interesting, thank you. And you've done your bachelor's from Durham University. So how did you think about getting into real estate from Durham to Knight Frank? How was the transition, the journey, but how did you get into real estate?
So it's an interesting journey. Sort of a normal route for someone potentially studying classics or something, which is what I did at Durham, was to go into law. And I always thought I would want to be a lawyer or a barrister because I like arguing, or maybe selling. It's a good one of those. And when I left university, I was looking at applying to law conversions. And I took a job in an agency because I needed to earn some money whilst I was waiting to do these applications. And I again started working as an assistant in the Wimbledon office. And the market in Wimbledon is very seasonal. And I was working there in the summer. People were away on summer holidays, but there was a lot of demand with people coming in wanting to rent properties. So even though I didn't have any experience, they said, can you help with these viewings? Can you go and do this? And then I think I did about 9 deals in 2 weeks, and they were like, whoa, okay, maybe she knows what she's doing. And then someone in the Chelsea office went on maternity leave. So they said, Jess, can you go to Chelsea? So I went to Chelsea, and then I was walking around this amazing neighborhood, meeting all these incredible people. And I thought, every person that I know studying law is finding it really boring and not enjoying it. Sorry if there are any lawyers in the room here. And so I said, this is what I want to make my career. And that's when I researched who I want to work for. And I thought, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it properly and I want to be the best. And I thought Knight Frank were the most impressive global company. They're a privately owned business. I just really liked their sort of ethos and everything about them. And so that's when I took the job as the admin assistant to get my foot in the door.
As all of us, there are a lot of real estate students in the room today, and a lot of other degrees as well. But everybody who knows real estate definitely targets Knight Frank for summer internship, for grad roles, and a lot of students in the room, I'm sure, are looking into Knight Frank to get into the company. How was your experience there? How did you find Knight Frank?
When I joined Knight Frank, the real estate market was a very different landscape to what it is now. There were no brokerages in London, and the market still is extremely male dominated, and I'm sure you've all sort of heard the phrase pale, male and stale, which is what Knight Frank was. It was an amazing platform for me to meet ultra high net worth clients. If you're working in real estate and at the upper end, you need to have access to these clients, and either you do that by having an amazing private network yourself or leveraging off a brand. And Knight Frank had an incredible brand, which meant I could meet, all of these billionaires and ultra millionaires. So that was fantastic for me. However, the corporate environment and that sort of traditional archaic model was not something that I could see myself working in for a long period of time, and something that I thought, needed drastic change. And so that's why I then decided to move out of that business. So it was incredible for me to have the opportunity to meet these people, sell many 20 million, 45 million pound homes and build a name for myself. But ultimately it was then sort of time to go, because it is a company that maybe has not evolved with the times as much, which is hard when you're a big company and the market is moving so quickly. You can't be as agile as if you're effectively a startup like DDRE, and this is a big, global firm.
So how did the transition to DDRE happen from Knight Frank? How did you find it?
Well, it was very scary, because at Knight Frank you are a salaried employee, so I had a salary that I got every single month, and then dependent on my billings for the year, I would get a bonus at 2 points throughout the year. So roughly based on my billings and my salary, I knew how much I was going to earn, and it was a pretty safe job. Where I work now, I'm completely self-employed, so I have no salary, and then when I sell something, I'll earn 70% commission on what I've sold. But if I don't sell anything, I don't earn anything. So when I joined the company, I had, I think, about £19,000 worth of savings, and I moved into a family friend's house to live with them so I didn't have to pay rent. And then I didn't earn anything for almost a year. And I fortunately did a deal quite early on, but it had a delayed completion. So I don't know if you know what delayed completions are in the room. Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, it means when you buy a property, you exchange, and that's when you put down the 10% of money, and contractually and legally it's yours. And then completion is when you pay the remaining 90% and you legally own the house. Normally, a completion may be 1 month after exchange, and a delayed completion is probably anything sort of 2 months beyond that. And the transaction that I agreed within 6 weeks of being at the company, but it had a 9-month delayed completion. So I knew I was going to get paid, but not for another 9 months. And then, interestingly, within that time period, the person who was my client got divorced. They're quite a high-profile person that you would know, and they got divorced, and it was in all the papers everywhere. So he no longer needed a house in London, in the UK, and I didn't know if he was going to buy the house or not, and so then would I be due my fee? And he ended up not buying the house, but he still paid me my fee for all of the work that I'd done. So that financially was very uncertain and very scary to start with, but it's extremely rewarding, and I love, being my own boss and having that autonomy. How hard I work directly correlates to how much I earn. So if I'm working every weekend or every evening, it's because I want to. And yeah, aside from sort of the financial aspect, going to, being your own boss, you're doing things which, I'm sure you'll be studying here as well, kind of, managing your accounts, insurance, pension, all of that stuff, which I'd never had to think about before. There's a lot more sort of admin involved, being self-employed. And then sort of on the very positive side, you'll know a huge part of what we do is using social media to promote our listings, promote our properties, meet clients, and that is a huge part of the job that I really enjoy doing. Filming our properties, getting people through the door, and meeting amazing clients. I've met so many amazing people since I've been here, so it's been great.
Definitely, I believe that your transition from Knight Frank to DDRE did come with risks, but it also led to building the brand that you have today, which is superb. And you also have a magazine article which says that you did a sale through your Instagram.
I did.
Yes, so could you tell us a bit about that, please?
So this, I've actually, I'm not speaking into it before. I've actually done a couple of Instagram sales now, but the first one that I did was actually £25 million, and the buyers were friends with a buyer of mine that I was already working with, and she said she wanted to buy a house in London, and her friend said, oh, you must speak to Jess. And she used Instagram as a reference point for, did I like Jess? Does it look like I trust her? Do I want to work with her? And then as a result, she reached out to me. She was based in Malaysia. And then I would go around and FaceTime her, show her these properties. And she started with a budget of 10 million. We increased it all the way to 25. And she ended up buying this house without seeing it, purely on FaceTime and from videos that I was sending her. And I'm sure lots of you use social and digital channels yourselves at the moment, but if you aren't, I can't urge you sort of enough to start doing it, because this is, I think, a direct example of how important it is, even if, it's not like a shop where you sort of click on the photo of the property on Instagram and buy it. It is a reference and research tool for so many people. Think about every time you go to a restaurant, every time you look at a cafe, you'll look it up on Instagram and see what you think, and if you want to go there. And that's what everyone does now with their real estate brokers and any kind of advisor in the ultra high net worth environment. So it's really something that everyone should take very seriously.
And I wanted to ask that as you're a DDRE and Knight Frank, both of the places you had exposure to ultra high net worth clients, and so all of us in the room right now, we are looking at real estate from a theoretical perspective as to how to do valuations and the location factors. But from your perspective, what do you think ultra high net worth clients look at, or what factors matter to them the most when they're looking into buying a property?
Into buying a property, or the person that they're working with?
Both actually. First of all, as you said, that your personal brand value on Instagram really helped get a sale through, and also when they're looking at a property, what factors do you think lead to them getting convinced earlier, or maybe some delays?
So it will completely depend on the reason why they're buying that property. So if someone has, if an ultra high net worth has a very diverse portfolio, which they might have, with money in the market, real estate, commercial and residential, and they want to add to their portfolio, they'll likely go, okay, right, let me pick a location in prime central London that I know is going to hold its value even if the market falls through the floor, and where can I sort of effectively get the best deal within that location? What's going to protect my capital the most? So even if there are huge geopolitical tensions going on, I know that my money is safe here. And people don't buy real estate as sort of a pure growth investment anymore, because we don't have asset inflation like we used to. It is simply sort of a safe store of capital. So you go, I want to keep my money safe. You're going to pick a prime location. You're going to pick one that has sort of, sounds silly to say, as sort of little negatives as possible. But for example, that means in Mayfair, you're likely to buy an apartment. You're not going to buy a fourth floor walk-up without a lift, because you'll disregard a huge proportion of the market. So ideally, you'll want to buy a first or second floor with a lift, ideally to have a porter, to have parking, and with a good amount of light and in a good location in Mayfair. And you'll just do that and then look at the numbers. If you're an ultra high net worth buying for your family, you want to create a wonderful home where you're going to bring up your children for the next 10 to 15 years. So I'll see people who work, in finance, the most sort of, rigid, astute, careful people, and it will come to buying their own home, and they will pay, way above market value. I have a client at the moment who has one of the most successful companies in the world right now, and he's looking at buying something, and I've told him the value of where the property is probably in the mid-12s, and he's bidding almost 20% more purely because he wants that house. So the numbers don't matter to him. This is where I'm going to picture my home for the next 15 years, and it's a combination of your head and your heart when you're buying in that instance. So it really depends on the individual circumstance.
That's very interesting. 20%.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, like, investors, like the example that you just took, people like them who have like a lot of capital to invest and are only looking at like factors such as, okay, the home they're going to stay in for the next 15 years. What do you think makes London stand out amongst anywhere else in the world still, and what drives the London market with international investors?
I love that question because I literally say the whole time we have this phrase, we say London is London, and there's no real way of like quite describing why London is so special, but everyone wants a piece of London. If you have a real estate portfolio, this is the jewel in your crown. Wherever you are in the world, if you say you own a piece of London, everyone is like, wow, I've made it. And on the kind of practical side of that, we have the most incredible, culture, media, the fact that you can walk out of your door in Mayfair, you can walk through Green Park and get to Horse Guards Parade to see people sitting on horses in military uniforms doing a change of guard that they've been doing for the last 400 years, but then cross the road into a 5-star hotel and stay the night and have the most incredible service, and then walk 2 minutes up from there and go and see the latest play, and then decide actually you want to nip back to Mayfair and go and shop in Dior and Loro Piana. There's no other city in the world that can offer all of that, and London is just made up of all of these little villages where you can go from street to street and everything is so different. So whoever you are, you can find like a piece of London that will perfectly fit you and be your home.
Definitely, like a lot of students here in the room today are international students as well, so we are here for the same reasons in the first place. And I just wanted to ask, without naming any names or any sensitive details, but if you have any particular deal that has been very memorable in your career recently, or maybe in the whole time career.
So I have two that really stand out. One of them was in 2020 in COVID, and I was helping a woman buy a house, and she had been looking for a house for 2 years, and I was the first woman that she'd spoken to. She was looking about between sort of £5 and £10 million, and at that time there were basically no women in Kensington where she was looking who operated that part of the market. It was they were kind of admin people or sort of £1 to £3 million market. And so I helped her, and we sold loads of properties on with other agents, and nothing was quite right. And then I saw this house, and I said, "Wow, I know this is her house. She's going to love it." But it was £1 million more than she wanted to spend. So I kept watching it, and then I saw there was a £500,000 price reduction, and I said, "Come on, we have to go and see it." And we went into the house, we viewed it, and we met the owner, and she was my client was a barrister, and the seller was a lawyer, and they had the same law books, and my client said how much she loved everything she'd done in the house, and she wouldn't want to change a thing. And the seller was selling because her husband had passed away, and he'd actually built the house and had designed everything, and it meant so much to her that my client wanted to keep everything the same. And she walked out and she said, "Jess, this is my house, but I can't get to her price." And so anyway, we made an offer, and then someone else came in to the property, and they wanted to buy the house, but the seller heard them walking around and saying, "We're going to change this, we're going to do this," and they offered £500,000 more than my client offered, but the seller didn't want to sell to them because they were going to be changing everything that her husband had done. And so eventually we managed to agree the deal at 6.75 million. And I had tea with her there 2 weeks ago, and she still speaks to the seller who downsized around the corner. And it was just like really lovely. She means a lot to me. She's an incredible woman. And she's like a single mom with 2 kids, and so it really meant a lot to her to be dealing with a woman in this house. So yeah, that meant a huge amount to me. And then the next one is a house I sold in Holland Park for £27.3 million. That's not the largest deal that I've done, but it was a corporate transaction, which means that the buyer was buying the company rather than the asset. So, when you see on TV shows, for example, doing M&As, people buying companies, working really late into the night, thousands of lawyers on it. That's effectively what this transaction was. And there was loads of debt in the company because it was a developer who had leveraged against the house in order to finish the works. And there were 16 lawyers on the buyer side, 16 professionals, lawyers and accountants, and tax advisors, and 5 on my client side. And I was basically the linchpin orchestrating the transaction and conversations between sort of each of these individual people. And I became, from the very outset, I said to my client's lawyer, I haven't done this before, so I will need your guidance and I'll ask you lots of questions. But I got so invested in it, and I learned so much. And this went on for 6 months because it takes a long time to do a corporate transaction. And when you do a corporate transaction, there's no exchange and then completion. You just simultaneously exchange and complete. So nothing, you don't have any certainty until the deal is done. And then the night before we were due to complete, the buyer pulled out of the transaction. And I was there, I still remember it, it was like 10:30 at night, and he messaged me and said, I'm out. I said, let's speak in the morning. And then we managed to get back on track and completed the transaction. And the seller's lawyer said to me, we could not have done this deal without you. The amount of chasing, orchestrating, puppeteering, speaking to the seller and the buyer, making sure they don't hate each other, which is the biggest hurdle in doing a property transaction, is making sure the buyer and seller don't hate each other, because buying a property is completely irrational. And if you decide you don't like the seller, even if it's the perfect house for you and your family, you can just say no, I'm walking away. So making them not hate each other, which was so hard. And it really brought to the forefront how important and integral agents are to transactions. And we may not be lawyers, we may not be tax advisors, we may not be accountants, but our role is so vitally and crucially important, and that really needs to be sort of embraced by everyone in a transaction. And when it is, the transaction goes very well.
I think the point that you just mentioned, that not the buyer and the seller not hating each other, I think your first example is really a testament of that how preserving sentimental value helped in the
Exactly. And I had a transaction fall out of bed, which is a phrase we use, fall out of bed just before Christmas, because the buyers hated the seller because she was very unreasonable, I would say. She wanted to keep all the light fittings, so literally the light fitting like this, wanted to unscrew it and take it out of the house, literally gut the house, which is completely unreasonable. And even though the buyers loved the house, they said we can't do it anymore, and they withdrew.
So how do you deal with maybe tricky clients, or maybe tricky sellers, or maybe if you're in a tough position with negotiation between them, how do you deal with that situation?
You have to be extremely patient, and again, depending on who it is, you have to adjust the way that you manage them accordingly. I found that it's been a huge advantage being a woman and also a young woman dealing with high value assets and ultra high net worths, because the men that I deal with are often, they're not intimidated by me, they have an ego, and if I give them a piece of advice, they tend to think, okay, well, Jess is saying this, they'll think on it, and then they'll come back and say, yeah, you're right, let's do it. Whereas I've witnessed, old colleagues of mine who may have been male of a similar age giving a piece of advice, and then the client feels like maybe they're sort of attacking them, which is not the way at all, it's just kind of, inbuilt into them. And yeah, so I think being sort of very patient and empathetic and understanding the key things we need.
If I could go back to your Knight Frank experience for once, I just wanted to ask that since ourselves as students right now, if we go into any company today, maybe Knight Frank, Savills, any JLL, any company, students are at a beginning role right now, they're in a grad job. So looking at you, people see that, okay, this is someone who has gone from an entry-level role all the way to being the top broker at Knight Frank. So what do you think were the success factors or the key parts that led you to having that successful journey?
I never said, I always said yes. I always pushed for every role and opportunity, and I pushed for it ahead of when I should have probably pushed for it. So, they had parameters. You had to have been a negotiator or been there for 3 years before you could be promoted to being an associate, and then I was made associate within 2 years, and then you were supposed to have another 3 years between associate and partner, and I was made a partner within 18 months of doing that, and I just pushed and I pushed and I pushed, and the person who kind of put me forward for partner in the end, I was pushing that from the moment that I was made associate. So he knew that that was what I wanted. And obviously I had to back it up with, the hard work and the results. But ultimately, he knew from the very first moment what I wanted, and I was not going to let up. And so, he's going to kind of give it to me, or his life's going to be hard. But I think in this environment and in this industry, you really do have to push, because there are still a lot of similar people that work in real estate and a lot of networks, and it's very easy for people to be sort of passed over for promotion roles, and so you really have to be very gung-ho and go for it.
One question again from a student perspective. As a society, we obviously, and our professors, everybody definitely says go out and network. And you are definitely someone who has shown time and time again how your network has helped you. And so, what are your perspectives on networking? Do you recommend students do it?
Yeah, 100%. And so, do you remember Francesca, who you met? The last 2 years I've done an internship on International Women's Day, and I did one last year, and I had so many amazing applications I couldn't give it to everyone, and so I said let's do a coffee and a walk in Primrose Hill, and this is where we met. I met some other people, and then last year we had a WhatsApp group, and I put in the WhatsApp group, there's a ticket for an event tonight, it's a Knight Frank sponsored thing, does someone want to come? It was £250 ticket, but does someone want to come? And then Francesca said yes straight away, and she came to the event. She then sat on my table, and she'd been applying for, she wanted to apply to Knight Frank for an internship. And then when we were there, all of the big heavyweights of Knight Frank were there, and I went and I introduced her to Chelsea Whelan, who runs the residential academy there. I then introduced her to the head of London and introduced her to the head of lettings. And then following that event, I email introed her to all of them, so then she had their contacts, and then I got a message from her last week saying that she'd had an interview with Chelsea and it went really well, and that she hopes she's going to get it. So Francesca said yes to an opportunity that was put in front of her, which, I was like, super kudos to you. On the day, came, went to an event with no one she knows, and then spent the evening networking with everyone, and now hopefully she's going to have a job as a result of it. So any opportunity that you get like that, say yes, 100%. Don't think twice about it, just do it. These societies that you belong to are really important as well, because you're also, you can all help each other. And if there are any sort of other passions that you have, outside of work, uni, studying, I would go and join a society, not necessarily within the university, but out of that. For example, I love reading. Join a book club. You're here in Marylebone, so you have a lot of ultra high net worth people here in Marylebone. Is there a book club at the local library that has residents in the area living in it? You go to that book club every single week. You will slowly become friends with and get to know the residents that go to that book club. You will have a shared interest because you're both there for the same reason, so it's much easier to form a bond of trust and have her trust you, even though, when it comes to real estate, you'll be an inexperienced person. And then later down the line, she may be wanting to sell or buy. They'll know that you're studying real estate, or that you just graduated, or that you're working in this, and they'll say, hey, this is what I want to do. And you go, okay, cool, let me connect you with this. You may not be able to help right now at the moment, but you can introduce them to the person that you interviewed with at Knight Frank, which then makes you look good to the people at Knight Frank because you're providing them a connection.
So this is the call for everybody to make use of their central London locations,
Yeah,
Marylebone High Street.
And even, walking, when I worked in our St John's Wood office in North London, my boss would say we had to walk up and down the high street at least twice a day. And that community there is a very small community, and everyone hangs out on High Street. And so we would do that every single day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, like get a coffee, and then in the afternoon get a snack, or just sit outside a cafe. And then you slowly get to recognize, all of the locals there, all of the people. You smile, you wave, you nod, and yeah, that really helps. So you should definitely do that with Marylebone High Street. I see like the same people walking down there all the time. And actually, Caroline and my team, we put forward an offer today for a client of ours, a retained client, which means they're looking at buying something, but they're paying us to help them buy. So rather than the owner paying the selling agent, it's the buyer paying the buying agent. Caroline met this person by going into her dry cleaners where she lives, and she said, I know you will have clients who want to buy or sell a house around here. And she tested him, and he said, actually I have someone, introduced us to our client, we've signed them up, we've put an offer in. It's a £2 million house in North London where Caroline lives, and they're paying us a 2% fee. So that's £40,000 from someone that she was introduced to by the dry cleaner. So it just shows exactly, you just push and push and push, and you never know like where your network will take you, but just always be open to the opportunity, and also, like, very importantly, always be a good, kind person. The dry cleaner would never have introduced this person to Caroline if she wasn't a good, kind person. The lady who does my nails, who I've been going to for the last 5 years in Kensington, and she has all her Kensington clients come in there. She's introduced me to someone who's looking to buy a £4 million house.
To follow up on that, you've met someone at, as you said, like the dry cleaners, or if you've now come in touch with someone from like a very good neighborhood who you think can be a potential client or might potentially like the property that you've listed, what is your suggestion for building relationships?
As in, once you've met this person?
Yes.
Well, I think you have to know yourself and know your qualities and why people would want to, trust and like you, and just be very kind of secure in that fact, and then be very authentic and genuine with them. You can't sort of force a relationship, but you can, build on a professional relationship by, as I said, being the sort of good person that you trust, and then building on that with constant communication and speed and delivery of service. So you kind of have sort of two routes to go down, and the full down sort of professional version is, people want things like this, and if you deliver it to them as quickly as possible, they'll say, okay, I know that I can give it to you because you're always going to respond to me and I'll always get what I want. So you do that, and you can have, if you need to have sort of a more hands-on relationship, that's the way. You'll then have other people where, as I said, you immediately align because you both love books, you both love football, you both love whatever it is, and then it's very easy to build a much sort of deeper relationship from the outset like that. But with both of them, communication is the most important thing, and you just continuously communicate. I find the best way of deepening relationships is by not talking about work. So if I know that if I have a very professional relationship with the client and we don't sort of like bond on something so much, but say, they're Chinese and it's Chinese New Year, I say, happy Chinese New Year, start from that basis. Then whenever there's something in the headlines about something related to China or their aspect of work, saying, oh, I saw this and thought of you. And you don't have to sort of say, oh, like we both want to paint our nails pink or something, not like that. You can do it from that sort of more formal manner, but whichever way it is, it's just keep communicating and being in touch with them.
With the personalized touch, as you said.
Yeah.
And one question is, reflecting back on the career you've had and where you are now, is there anything you wish you would have known at the start of your career that would have maybe accelerated things?
I don't think so, because I think my career was kind of as accelerated as it could have possibly been. I think I found it very hard to be in a lot of rooms because I was always the young girl, and there were more senior men around me, and I would find often clients would defer to the man when, you know, asking a question rather than me, even though I may have sold far more houses than my colleague next to me and know far more, you know, what this type of like buyer profile in the house is like. And so I would struggle a lot with pitching, which is when you go to meet a client for the first time and you're trying to say, yes, instruct me to sell your house. I would often get basically stage fright in putting my opinion out there or advice out there, because I think he doesn't want to listen to my opinion, he wants to listen to my colleague. So I think I did, it's not something that I wish I'd known better, but I wish I'd been more comfortable in myself to speak more openly and you know, give that advice and be confident in my own ability, because that took, you know, a long time to get to that point.
I think you answered another one of my questions with that answer, as there are a lot of females in the room today, and as you said, real estate is a male-dominated field. Any particular suggestions on top of that for females to navigate this industry and be more confident, as you said?
It's really hard because I still, you know, I'll still feel not particularly confident sometimes when I go in and meet certain clients, and it's not easy to just kind of make yourself confident. But I think you can be very, comfortable and secure in the fact that women generally are, it's a stereotype, but more empathetic than men. And I think empathy is what makes agents great agents. And so I believe we're already at an advantage to men in whatever situation we're in, because the end product of getting the deal agreed, getting two people to like each other and not hate each other, and then make that transaction go all the way through to the end, we are in a much stronger position to get that done. And so even if you walk into a room and don't feel confident, remember that and think, okay, if I can walk out of here and just get his trust or their trust, in me as an agent, I know that I'll probably be able to deliver it better than my competitor or the next person that I'm up against.
Definitely, I 100% agree with you. Empathy, I must say, I don't see it in all of the female friends that I have, in myself, in anybody I know. It's definitely a strong point, not a disadvantage.
100%.
And we have received a lot of questions from students that have signed up in advance. So I would like to start with one of the questions that said that I have a question that if students are particularly interested in luxury or prime real estate from the start, so how do you recommend approaching that part of the industry, as being someone in university right now, they've just graduated, maybe how do they approach, and are there any particular brokerages or career paths that you would suggest to maybe get a head start in this competitive industry?
So I would say the only way you can kind of get a real head start is if you had a great personal network that puts you in that ultra prime position, because then those people already trust you because they know you, and you can lean on other people to get the expertise. There are not many people who are fortunate enough to be in that position, and so you need to kind of work your way up and sort of prove that you are a good person and that you have the expertise. So I think the best way for people to do this is by going into a corporate environment first, like a Knight Frank or a Savills. They have, you know, a huge amount of funding behind them to do amazing internships, apprenticeships, training, which brokerages, for example, like DDRE, don't. You can learn a huge amount from them, and you can also meet an amazing network of clients whilst you're there. So even if you know that you want to go into the brokerage model, doing Knight Frank or Savills for 2 to 3 years, you will get the training, you will be able to leverage the fact that you work for Knight Frank. So still now, when I go and pitch to people and meet new clients, lots of people don't know who DDRE is. It's a small business and it's only 6 years old. So I will preface how I sell myself with, I was a partner at Knight Frank for almost 10 years. And immediately it gives me credibility, and they go, oh, okay, yeah, she knows what she's talking about, and then I can go in and do my pitch. So, Stina, who works on my team, she was only at Knight Frank for 9 months, but she can still now say, I worked at Knight Frank in the Notting Hill lettings team, one of their most successful rentals team in all of London. So you can add that credibility and leverage to your name. You will get a great amount of training, and you will definitely meet a huge wealth of contacts that you wouldn't do going elsewhere.
And a final question from my side, for specifically the luxury real estate market, what is your perspective on the future? What do you think about it, and the demand and supply issue in particular?
So it's very interesting. I went on holiday at the end of February, and I did sort of sign off to all of my clients and said, we've got no political and economic headwinds against us. Interest rates are falling, buyers are making decisions, we're going to have a great year. I went away for a week and I came back, and World War III had almost started. And now it looks like interest rates are going to rise. Genuinely, are we on the brink of World War III? People don't know what's happening. So we started the beginning of the year with a lot of momentum, and buyers last year, there was so much stagnation in the market because people were really hesitant about what was going to come up in the November budget. The budget was delayed by a month, so it was much later than it normally would have been, and basically no transactions happened. And so once that was out of the way, we had so many people who were saying, right, I just want to get on with it, I just want to make decisions, and I want to buy now. So we started the year really, really strong. Now people are just pausing a bit. If you were buying a house now, you would say, well, I'm going to wait and see what happens with interest rates. The Bank of England are meeting tomorrow, they're probably going to hold, even though at their last meeting, it was a real knife edge decision as to whether they should cut them or not. So I think we're going to have a little bit of a pause in the market. However, in the very sort of needs-driven areas, that means probably Notting Hill, Kensington, West London, which are family-dominated areas. So people who are moving because they've had another child, they need to upsize, or they need to downsize. Those needs-driven buyers are still going to be buying, irrespective of what's going on in the world, because they live in London and they want to remain in London. So last year was literally the worst market on record in history in London, and Notting Hill still outperformed, literally ridiculously well, had multiple best bids, pound per square foot records achieved, which you would just not think if you looked at the rest of London. So I think that part of the market is still going to perform really well. We actually had a best bids on Monday this week. It was an unmodernised house on a communal garden in Notting Hill, asking £7 million, and it went for nearly £8.5 million, which you would not think is happening in this market right now. And then I do think there will be more positivity, because London is, when we have such unstable times geopolitically, London is kind of thrown into the limelight as a very safe haven. We are, as I said before, a very safe store of capital. Everyone reveres our justice system as the most fair in the world, and everyone sort of wants to be here. So, I think we will still have a positive year ahead for super prime. I think the next sort of 2 to 3 weeks will probably be a little bit of a pause, but overall, I think it is going to be better than last year.
Thank you so much. Would you like to take some questions from the audience now?
Of course.
I have a very quick question. How do you think the news that I've heard is basically that the high net worth and the ultra high net worth are currently leaving London and the European capitals more towards the Arab Emirates, and also due to the Iran conflict right now. But how do you think how do you kind of put that in your outlook for the luxury residential in London?
So lots of people have left, and they've been leaving since 2024 when the Conservatives wanted to abolish the non-dom regime. If you were a non-domiciled resident, it meant you could live in the UK but only be taxed on income in the UK, not worldwide. They reduced that limit from 17 years to 4 years. So if you think 17 years, someone can be in London, they can educate their children for that whole period and then kind of move off. So that worked really well for ultra high net worths. It was then reduced to 4 years, and everyone was like, we need to get out of here because we can't educate our children in that time frame, and we don't want to be taxed globally on this income. And so lots of people started leaving from 2024. It's a trend that we've kind of continued seeing, but none of these people actually want to leave. The only reason they're going to the Middle East or to Milan or to Switzerland is because it's a low tax environment, but no one actually wants to live there. They think Switzerland is boring, Milan doesn't have enough schools to accommodate all of the families that are moving there, and Dubai is a very sort of different type of lifestyle, which a lot of people who live in London and sort of want all of the culture and everything that is here, you don't get that in Dubai. So even though these people are leaving, they still retain assets here, they still want to be here, and I think ultimately, they will come back. I've got clients at the moment who they moved for tax reasons, but they're now looking at buying, a £7 million house, which will be their pied a terre, but hopefully they will come back in the long run. Everyone's like, okay, in 2 years' time, maybe we'll have a different government. Everyone wants to come back, so I'm not too worried about the exodus, because these people are also so well capitalised that they can still buy, they still make, the market move. It's more sort of interest rates, I would say, that are driving sentiment at the moment than that. We've been dealing with that for sort of 2 years now, so it's kind of filtered into the market already.
Thank you. Hi, thank you. My name's Amanda. Nice to meet you. I was just going to ask you, obviously we're focusing mostly on London here, but what other areas in the UK would be good for super prime as well?
So the price brackets kind of change depending on different areas you go to. So super prime in London starts at 10 million. When you go into the country, for example, it starts at 5. If you're wanting to go to another city, I think it's very hard to have kind of a super prime comparison tool. A super prime might be the equivalent of a sort of a £3 million property.
Home counties, kind of countryside outside of London vibes. Is there like a better home county to be kind of focusing on, do you think?
I'd say sort of anything within kind of 90 minutes of London and west of London down to Surrey, the home counties, there are a lot of high value houses there and a lot of transactions, because people want to buy there because it's still easy to get in and out of London, but you can have your big country pad with your 50 acres, your pool, your tennis court, your paddle court, whatever it is that you want. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity in the country there to do that. Is that something you're focusing on?
Yeah, I love countryside properties and just the ruralness of it, and I think just kind of London after like so many years, I'm just going to get out of it a little bit. But it's just something that I'm thinking of for the future potentially. But there's not like a particular home county that you would say like, oh sorry, I would like to sell in, or Kent, you would like to sell in more, or
I would say South Oxfordshire, but that's because I'm from Oxfordshire and I know it. Sorry, there are a lot of houses there. I would say that feels less country. It's very sort of suburban, and more. It still kind of feels like London, but with a bit of like bigger gardens. You'd think the high value houses in the country are like, there are fewer of them, but over a greater distance. So if you look at someone who's managing high value country houses, they normally will cover multiple counties and areas, because we can have we can have 25 houses for sale on Argyle Road in Kensington and they'll all be over 10 million, whereas you go into Oxfordshire and there might be 2 houses for sale above 5 million at the time, so you'll cover a much broader area. What I would say being a country agent is that because you literally physically cannot get from one house to the other so quickly, you basically sit